I um, I think most of us here are familiar how WordPress works, but there are two people that don't know about how WordPress works. So I'm glad to be the one that will tell you a bit more about how we do things. So yes, the talk is about the community events in WordPress. My name is Francesca Marano. As you can hear from my accent, I'm from Italy. I am the Global WordPress Community Team representative. I'm very active in Italy, where I organize WordCamps and meetups in my town. And I'm the WordPress Community Manager for SiteGround, which is a web hosting company and a Drupal supporter. So first of all, let's define what kind of events WordPress does. WordPress brings people together in many different ways. The first one, and I would say it's really the heart of our events, are the local meetups. They are locally organized, that groups that get together face to face, ideally monthly. Not everyone can keep up with the monthly schedule because it's a lot of work. And since we also have another WordCamp and meetup organizer here with us, please, whenever you feel like, just chime in. And if anyone has questions while we go, just ask and we're going to chat about this. It's not going to be really a talk, just let's chat about this. So meetups are locally organized, ideally monthly. And it's just a group of people coming together talking about WordPress. They don't really have a required format. What you see here is actually the most difficult meetup to organize because it's a speaker and an audience, and it means that every month you have to find a speaker, and when you start doing this for a while, it's not super easy to do that. So if you want to do networking events or Q&A, hackathons, whatever works for your local group will work. Okay, so there is not a required format. It doesn't also matter how many people there are. I volunteer also for the community team, and when I go to WordCamps, which are our big events, I always sit at the contributor table, at the community table, and there's always people asking me, how do I start? How many people do I need? So basically 3 people talking WordPress in a room, it's a meetup. And the smallest meetup that I had the pleasure and honor to help kickstart was in Maidstone in Kent in the UK. They started 3 people at a lady's house that she made cakes, and they had tea, and now they're like 50 people meeting every month. So it really doesn't matter. Even if you're thinking about starting a Drupal meetup in your city, don't be put off by the number of people. Will someone show up? What we will talk about? Where do we do it? Do it in your living room with cake, and it will be just fine. So like most open source projects, the meetups were started as a grassroots initiative. People just got together and talked WordPress. Since 2010, the WordPress Foundation was established, and along with it, guidelines and rules came along. And what happened after that date, it took a little bit. The WordPress Foundation is paying for a meetup.com pro account, and every meetup that wants to join needs to put an application, say, hey, we would like to join the official chapter. And there's a process of vetting, interviewing, and then the city is added to meetup.com. Having this central account makes things so much easier, because despite the price of meetup.com not being very high, knowing that this is going to be bigger than you, and if you suddenly fed up with WordPress or Drupal or whatever initiative you're working with, knowing that there's a central account that will take care of that. So there's going to be a legacy. And, if you change life decision, you don't have to worry about the admin stuff. It really made it easier. And so to be part of the official chapter, you need to abide by this what we call the 5 good faith rules, which are basically a condensed version of our code of conduct. I don't know if you can read them. I'm now at the stage where I cannot see from afar. I cannot see from close by. It's awful. So I don't know if you can see, if you can read this. If you can read this, you will see that this is really like a lot of common sense. Just let's make these meetups pleasant for everyone. Let's not turn them into sales pitch, and let's make everyone feel accepted. So this is basically the base of the events, the philosophy of the events. So as far as things go, it's going pretty well for WordPress meetups right now. I took a screenshot of this map a few days ago. I have to read the numbers. So there are now 641 meetups in 95 countries. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year we have 100 countries. And there are almost 300,000 members, which is an incredible amount of people. And these are only the meetups that joined this official chapter. There are other thousands of meetups everywhere in the world that didn't join the chapter, and they still happen every month, and they're great. Some meetups just decide not to join because, for example, the restriction of not paying for speakers doesn't work well with every community, and they might want to help people from outside of town just come by, and they're going to pay the train ticket. This is not possible under the guidelines of the official meetup. So some meetups just don't join, and they just go their merry way, and they do amazing work with the WordPress community in their town. Of course, these numbers represent the bigger WordPress ecosystem. So WordPress is made of hundreds of thousands of freelancers, of small agencies, of bloggers that just decide to try this platform out. So obviously the fact that there is a huge market for this with very big numbers and very different levels of skill and technical knowledge helps a lot to have a lot of meetups where sometimes we don't even really talk about WordPress. There are some meetups that are for bloggers, content creators, designers, and it works because the CMS is basically everywhere. And as you can see, there are quite a lot in Africa, so we have to find out what's going on in Kenya. So once communities get a good meetup going, they go for a WordCamp. A WordCamp is what we call our yearly conferences. They were born as bar camps. Again, as a lot of open source initiatives, things kind of happen, and then they get a structure. So anything that goes from 50 people in a room talking about WordPress with sandwiches for a day, it's a WordCamp. And then there are massive WordCamps. So what we call our flagship events, which are WordCamp US and WordCamp Europe, have more than 2,000 people now. And they happen every year in different cities. This is a picture, I'm very proud because this is a picture of the WordCamp Torino, my hometown, where we restarted the WordCamp movement in Italy after 3 years of silence. And we had 250 people, and it was a lot of fun. So, and it all started really more or less abruptly and by chance. In 2006, Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of WordPress, posted, and this is from his blog, it says, in July, it said, okay, in August, we're going to have this bar camp in San Francisco, a word camp about WordPress. And then he closes the post with this sentence, don't know if this will work or not, but it should be fun regardless. And then it says a WordPress user conference called WordCamp. The idea is to bring WordPress users and developers so we can meet each other face to face, share stories, and try to figure out the future of our little corner of the online publishing revolution. This was 2006. This is how the story goes. It went very well, I would say. Look at this number. So the first year it was 2006, one event, and then it grew. There's a year when it didn't grow so much, and I'll tell you my theory. And it keeps growing. 2011 is the year the the WordPress Foundation was established, and guidelines came into place, so how to use the WordPress trademark, basically. So a lot of WordCamps that happened in 2010 were like, whoa, what do we do now? How do we organize this? Everything is changing. So they had a bit of an inflection, but then everything went up again. And I would say 2018 is going to be a very good year. Oh, sorry, you want to? I published this already in my node as I was instructed, but please. It was very nice to publish things in my node. I felt very good about it. And this is 2018. It's a really good year for WordCamp. We already had 85 events up until August. There are 55 planned, September to December, and there are at least another handful that are in pre-planning. They might happen this year, they might happen at the beginning of next year. But yeah, it's going well. So Matt doubts, I would say, they got a very strong answer to what's going on and how people would react to this kind of events. I think, again, lowering the barrier is something that definitely helped WordPress as a project grow. So the meetups, again, they're not super technical. They're meetups that are not technical at all, and this brings more people in every time that are not experienced WordPress users. Some of them never even saw WordPress, to be honest. Same thing goes with the price. We price our events at $20 per day, or the equivalent of what is called the Big Mac Index, where you see how much a Big Mac costs in every country, and then you arrange your prices, which means that also our flagship events, WordCamp Europe, 2 days, 2 or 3 tracks, depending on the years. 1 contributor day is 40 euros. You also get food, swag, whatever you get here. And WordCamp US, same thing, 2 days, 2 or 3 tracks, 1 contributor day, 2,000 people, $40. I have to say, and I'm not ashamed of admitting it, sometimes we use this as a selling point to people that don't know what WordPress is. We're like, come on, for 20 euros, you get food, you get a t-shirt, you get some tracks. What do you have to lose here? And honestly, this is how we bring new people on. It's so much easier to convince them and experience that. You would be amazed at how many people tell me, no, I'm not technical enough. Now, half of this room has been to a WordCamp, so we all know WordCamps are not technical at all, basically. But a lot of people are afraid, oh, they're too technical for me. I'm just a blogger. I just have a blog for my hobby, or, you know, I don't even know what I want to do from WordPress. And you say, come on, it's $20. Come see what it is, and you get them hooked. It's not like heroin, where you give the first thing for free and then you hope they'll come back, but it's pretty close. So yeah, lowering the barrier, lowering the entrance barrier, also in terms of prices, definitely helped us grow. If you go to wordcamp.org, you'll see all the WordCamps. There was one in Kenya. I'm trying to remember because we just had this conversation. I will find out. So you can see things are happening. Not everywhere, unfortunately, but in a lot of places. In addition to WordCamps, we run contributor events. Now, contributor events could go from, I would say the most common type of contributor event is a contributor day that we usually have attached to a WordCamp, either the day before, the day after, or something like that. But they also can be standalone events, and they can be a night. We did one in Torino for a core team, and I saw that Glasgow last week had a standalone contributor day, and those are great events because there you can really show the ropes to new people. Instead of just telling them, go read the documentation, this is the first step. I think in every open source project, it's like, hey, I'd like to help. What should I do? Go read the documentation. So the documentation, 100% of the time is in English, and you're Italian. So your English, in my case, is not perfect. So if I have to go and read pages and pages and pages of documentation, that's a bit off-putting. If I go to a contributor day, most of the time, someone that speaks my language will introduce me to the whole process of contributing, and that makes it a lot easier for everyone to get on board. I think a very interesting type of contributor event that we run is the Global Translation Day. For one day, 24 hours, we concentrate on translating WordPress. We have live streams for 24 hours, talks about internationalization and localization. We use Crowdcast, so for 24 hours, we have people from all over the world doing talks and sessions like at a normal event. And there are groups of people getting together and do a translation sprint. Now, this is a picture that I love because the one on the top is a internet cafe in Kathmandu. And there's an actual monk translating WordPress in an internet cafe in Kathmandu. And the other one is my city. We're having cake. We're big lovers of cake. So we're doing this in a library, in a bookshop, and we're translating. And these are the results of last Global Translation Day, which was last year in September. And there's going to be another one this coming September, I think the 30th. So this is really interesting to see how we approach localization. WordPress is now translated in more than 160 languages, and these sprints really help completing some locales and starting new locales, so they're really helpful. And this is where I tell you to go contribute to Drupal. I thought this was the best place to put this slide. Because I do believe that contributing to open source is so important for everyone. And honestly, it doesn't matter, well, it does, but to an extent, it doesn't matter if you contribute to Drupal, to WordPress, to both of them, to Ghost, to Perch, whatever you decide to do. I think we will all benefit from this. The open web will benefit from this. We will all learn best practices on everything, not just code. So if you get the chance to attend on Friday, please do. Unfortunately, I won't be here because I will be at Contributor Day in Rome, in Italy. So no luck for me this year for the Drupal contributor event, hopefully next year. And finally, we're seeing more and more of these events that are called Do Actions. Those are hackathons, charity hackathons. So for one day, we put together 3 to 5 charities, and we put out a call for volunteers. We put together teams that will work on this charity website for the whole day. So we call for developers, designers, project managers, content writers, marketers. And as you can see, this one was in Bristol this year. And every table is a charity, and they're all working on that website. And it's clear, like this is really what you see is what you get. We're going to get there at 9 a.m. We're going to go home at 6 p.m. Whatever we manage to do in those 8 hours, it's yours to take. And this is really nice. This is, again, a kind of event that started in Cape Town in 2014. So there was only one, and this year we already had 10. So this is growing, and it's incredible. I love it. I think it's a great idea. So who is behind all of this? So we saw a lot of events, a lot of people going to these events. Who organizes them on the ground, and who supports them behind the scenes? First of all, the volunteers. The volunteers are so important. Everything that is made in WordPress.org is made by volunteers. There are a few people sponsored by their companies to work on different things, but most of the people do this as volunteers. There is no, this morning I was at a session, marketing open source open source initiatives, and everyone was talking about money. Oh, we will fundraise this to work on the, and I was like, where is this money you're talking about coming from? Because there's no money in WordPress. We don't do this. We don't do fundraising. We don't pay people to work on WordPress. The WordPress Foundation doesn't pay anyone to work on, there is not a WordPress team There are people sponsored by their companies, but not as many as you would think. It's not a big group of people. So everything is done by volunteers. There is a financial entity. So I said there is no money involved. There is no salary involved, but there's a lot of money involved because there's sponsorship money and there are vendors to be paid, obviously. The venues are not volunteering their venues, unfortunately. Like, we are volunteering our time and skills. Catering still wants to get paid, so we need to pay vendors. And last year, I think, or 2 years ago, I don't remember, the WordPress Foundation set up this subsidiary, the WordPress Community PBC, which is Public Benefit Corporation, I think, in the US, so they can deal with all the money. And then there's a community team. So I said no one gets a salary, but Automatic, which is the company behind WordPress.com, the commercial version, the SaaS version of WordPress, actually sponsors quite a few people to work on WordPress and quite a few people to work in the community team. And that is very helpful. And none of this would happen if we didn't have that team, because there's, as you can imagine, there's a lot of admin work. Paying invoices, getting invoices, wire transfers, stuff like that, and someone has to do it. And it's a big responsibility because basically there are between $2 and $3 million on the account, coming and going. So someone has to take responsibility to do this. And I am very happy to know that these 5-6 people from Automatic are working beside all of the tasks that they're doing for the community. They're also working on this. The community team, again, is made of volunteers. I volunteer for the community team. I think it's the only team where you go through certain training to be an active contributor, because you also have access to sensitive information. So we do training to become active. Everyone can contribute to the community team by organizing events, but if you want to become an active deputy, that's what we call, of the community team, you go through training. And then you do a number of tasks. And finally, sponsors. So if you ask yourself, how do we keep the prices this low, as $20 is really nothing, it's because we have very generous sponsors. Pantheon is also here with us in the room. We obviously sponsor a lot of events, but there's tons of companies that sponsor, from micro sponsorship. I think I even sponsored the WordCamp at some point with $100 with a micro sponsor ticket, to, I think for WordCamp US, it's 70 or 80,000 euros, the highest level. So sponsors, I include them in this presentation as an important key player of this whole ecosystem, because without them, it wouldn't be possible to make as many events for this ridiculously low prices. And then we have some tools that support us. This is also very important, because the more you streamline all these processes, the easier it's going to be to scale. If we were to do everything manually, like we did a few years ago, we couldn't handle so many groups at the same time. So the first very important tool is the website itself, WordCamp. Every time you apply for a WordCamp and your application gets accepted, you get a website. So for example, in Torino, it's 2016.torino.wordcamp.org, and every year we get this. Inside the WordCamp, which is a installation of a WordPress multi-site, you get all the tools, well, not all the tools, unfortunately, but we're getting there. A lot of the tools that you need: budgeting, sales ticket, speaker application, volunteer application. So a lot of the things you can deal with inside the WordCamp website, which I think is great. We use, as I said, meetup.com to manage all the meetups. This is basically because people were already in meetup.com. The meetups were already there, so it was just taking over with a pro account. It's not mandatory to use it, but what we found, and in some countries not popular at all. In Italy, there's a a political problem with the platform itself, because it was used by a party for years to organize their meetings. So, for example, a thing that we encounter in Italy, sometimes we get activists from the political party coming to the WordPress meetup and trying to talk about their party, and we're like, no, this is a WordPress meetup, this is an open source CMS, and it's confusing because honestly in Italy meetup is basically how do you say synonym with this specific political party. So it's, you know, not everyone uses meetup. In Russia they don't use it at all, but we found it is useful because it increases visibility and exposure. And it allows people from all over the world to find where their people at, right? So if I'm traveling to Bangkok, I just go to meetup.com, see if there's a WordPress meetup in Bangkok. I'm like, oh, tonight I'm going to meet with the Bangkok community. And this happens quite a lot. Like in Torino, we got people from Japan, Lebanon that were just passing through Torino. And they were like, let me check if there are people here, WordPress people. And that's how they found us. So it's good. And then we use Help Scout. The active community deputies use Help Scout to respond to requests from the community. Or when you apply to host a new meetup, or you apply to host a new WordCamp, we have a series of automation in place. So if you're organizing a WordCamp and we want to tell you, hey, remember that now it's time to open ticket sales. Remember that now we're going to send you the lanyards or stuff like that. All of this happens in Help Scout. And finally, we communicate on Slack. We have a massive, I think I heard somewhere that it's the biggest Slack workspace. It has over 10,000 people. This is another thing that the WordPress Foundation pays, this enterprise Slack account. And we meet there. I would say everyone that is somehow involved with WordPress, either by contributing to core or organizing event or wanting to know more about events, is going to be there. And I don't know if, no, this is absolutely a great thing that we have a lot of documentation, but we have a lot of documentation and sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. Sometimes we have a bit too much documentation because it evolved during the years, so there's not a great information architecture behind it, I would say, but it's every time we pick up on something that it's a common issue for people, we'll add it to the documentation. That's also very important. The other side is, again, the documentation is all in English, so if you're not a native English speaker, it's kind of off-putting to read all those pages in English, but it's a start. We have a WordPress TV, which is a website where you can go and see videos from most of the WordCamps of the last few years and some meetups. I mentioned the code of conduct because that's another thing that a lot of people that are from outside the WordPress community, or in general outside of open source communities, when they go to WordCamp, they're like, oh, this is so pleasant, you know, the atmosphere is nice and I feel a lot safer. And this is thanks to the code of conduct that, as you can imagine, in every open source initiative, when we started talking about an open code of conduct, there were a lot of discussions about it. Should we have it? Should we not? But I would say that 3 or 4 years in, it proved again to be a good choice. And I added the last link because Dries this morning talked about how Drupal Europe happened because the European communities didn't have DrupalCon this year. So they say, hey, let's get together and do a community-driven event. So that's exactly what happened to WordPress in Europe. The community in Europe was fragmented. Everyone was in his own country. Some of the communities were also very ancient and they were predating the WordPress Foundation. And, you know, they talked to each other, but not really. And there was this big WordCamp San Francisco, which was at the time the flagship event. And then in 2012, a group of people from that were already contributing to different teams say, hey, why don't we do like a continent WordCamp, where we meet all the European communities. And that's when WordPress community exploded in Europe. Because not only the existing contributors and the people that were already familiar with WordPress got together, this helped, you know, evangelizing and really bringing people together. And as a result, also the national communities became a lot stronger. 3 years ago, the WordPress community was not existent, basically. We had 2 meetups that were meeting every once in a while. We had a WordCamp in Milano for a few years that was very tied to a specific person that was in charge of everything. And then when the foundation was created, it didn't really sit well with the organizing team, how things were going. So WordCamps, there were no WordCamps in Italy for 3 years. And then through WordCamp Europe, people from all over Italy found each other and said, like, hey, we want to do this as well. We saw our friends from Croatia. They have a good thing going. We saw our friends from Bulgaria. WordCamp Sofia is rocking. Why don't we do this? So this is how it happened. So if you have 25 minutes, go see this talk, because it will exactly tell how this kind of community-driven events will help the whole project grow in general. So this is it for me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to be here and chat with you. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Questions?
Discussion, add things, because I think, I'm going to put this again, although I think you all know that this is happening, but I believe this is important.
Who do we talk to about the do actions? If we wanted to support one of those or have one of those in our local community.
So there is a website that I think it's called doactions.org. Not sure. Hugh Lashbrook from the community team. He's, I don't want to say in charge, because as a lot of things that happen in WordPress, this is just happening. So it happened in a kind of an informal way for a few years, and then last year, I don't know if you were in Nashville, of course you were, and Matt mentioned this during the State of the Word, and he mentioned about the do action. So you ping Hugh, there's a website on where there's a start of documentation on how to do this, but you either ping Hugh directly, or you ping any of the people that organized the one already. I know the people in Bristol were very happy. There's going to be one in Montreal. Maybe it was last week. I don't know. So, but come to the community events channel and Hugh will sort this out. Yes.
So hi. Thank you so much for this overview. I would have appreciated it when, even sooner when I tried to join the, WordPress community.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had to ask so many questions. Because as you said, the documentation is overwhelming. I was pointed to a lot of links. I still was, yeah. So do you think any of these, community events or the structure that the WordPress has can be brought onto the Drupal side of things now that you have?
I think, well, so this is my first time. Thank you for the question, but I actually hoped some of you will answer this question for me. No, so the thing is, I don't know the Drupal community at all. This is the first event I attend. I'm impressed. I'm loving every second of it, and I'm already regretting going away tomorrow. No, honestly. I think that the moment you have a few people that really need to get together, you have a good start. Then if you can add a bit of documentation, and of course also Drupal is a registered trademark, so you should have a bit of guidelines on how and who can use the Drupal trademark, then you're good to go. I don't think, I mean, obviously we're talking about huge numbers here, so the structure needs to be, I don't want to say rigid because it's not, but you know, you need a certain set of rules and expectations and tools. But if you're just starting out, I think what you need the most is enthusiastic people that are willing to sustain this. One problem that we see also in the WordPress community, despite all the tools that we provide and the support and even the financial support, because if meetups cannot find a free venue, and they have to pay for a venue, the foundation will give, like, I think €5 per person to go. Even with that, we see that a lot of meetup have a problem with sustainability. And why? In my eyes, it's because we come to this kind of events, we see it, it's flashy and it's big and there's swag and there's people, so we want to do the same thing in our local meetup. And maybe our local meetup really is made of 3 ladies that want to have cake and tea and talk WordPress. So, and I go back to that specific example because this is exactly what it should be. It should be, you know, 3 of your friends, you know what you want to talk about Drupal. You know which of the initiatives you want to explore and what you want to do. And maybe you just want to go and grab a coffee and talk Drupal. And maybe you all work from home. So that's another thing. The WordPress community is made of thousands and thousands of freelancers. And we all work by ourselves at home. I personally, in my pyjama, under the duvet, basically from October to March. So I'm like, oh, once a month I can get dressed, even put some makeup if I'm really in the mood for. So that's,
All right, thanks.
I think that's, and just come to any of the WordPress event and ask people. We had this discussion also this morning with the marketing initiatives. So the marketing team in WordPress is killing it. They're really killing it. They're great. They're doing amazing work. They're meeting each week. They have a Trello board. They're super organized. So now, WordPress as a project is not like that. The marketing team really get their things together. So if you want to know more about that, just ping them and talk to them. But yeah, I would say enthusiasm, but a clear vision for sustainability, because that's where a lot of meetups and WordCamps, I don't want to say fail, but sometimes they really feel like pressured into doing things a certain way. And no, just get together and talk about Drupal.
Yeah, so your views on the kind of governance model that the WordPress has for these kind of community events, what are your thoughts? Because my previous question was more towards the governance aspect of the events and such as well.
I don't know if I can even call that a governance in WordPress, because it is, but at the same time, it's not very strict. Like, we have a certain expectations because, you know, you still get to use a trademark. You still get to be the face that represents that project in the eyes of the people in that specific place. So I showed you the rules. They're pretty straightforward. There's nothing very oppressive about them. Yeah. I think overall it was a good thing for WordPress. Yes. Yeah.
From 2010 and 11.
Yeah.
That's when the guidelines came in.
Because
once it happened,
yeah.
there was a dip. That's fine.
Yes.
But then after that, I'm so sorry. But after that,
Yeah.
it ramps up like anything.
I mean,
Yeah, because it's structured now. So that's what I'm trying to bring in for the Drupal community as well. That's why I asked.
yes, I do believe that having a centralized home, both in terms of guidelines and in terms of tooling, helped us immensely. Imagine you want to start a Drupal meetup in your city. It removes the guesswork, which I think it's great. Because then you already have to worry about so many things like, where will I get the people? How do I advertise my meetup? Who is going to come? Who's going to speak? So at least you don't have to worry about how to house your project, and you don't have to worry about registering a meetup.com account on your name and then again in 6 months moving to Perch and not wanting to hear from WordPress or Drupal anymore in your life. And then there's an account and you don't need to worry about that. And this becomes even more apparent when you talk about WordCamps, because there's a lot of bureaucracy also involved, if you want, in terms of sponsorship, in terms of venues, the number of people, insurances, all these kind of things. So having a central, what we call actually WordCamp Central, taking care of all the boring stuff, really leaves you concentrating on the most important thing, which is the content for your attendees. Now, I know it seems very restrictive. I also mentor WordCamps, and whenever I mention a rule or something, I'm like, oh, so many rules. I'm like, okay, first of all, you don't need to follow the rules. You can call the event Camp Word, and it's not a WordCamp event, and you do as you please. But if you want to use the WordCamp name, which is a trademarked name, and obviously it brings with it the brand. So if I call an event WordCamp, people associate it with WordPress, and it gives another kind of weight to the brand itself. So I think that even if I myself, I'm the team representative, sometimes I don't agree with the things that we ask of people and of sponsors and of speakers, but then I always remind myself that this is the way we scale, by keeping it very streamlined and structured, and then it's easier to do this, and it's replicable. I don't know, we can scale to 20,000 events. No, we cannot, because we still have just 5 or 6 people dealing with the finances. But yeah. Any more questions or things you want to tell me about the Drupal community? I'm very curious about the Drupal community. I, for example, want to know from Andrea why the Drupal community in Italy is not happening. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think? Yes. Mm-hmm. And do you feel like any of the things that I told you about today can help Drupal also set up this kind of events? But at the same, yeah. I love verticals, so whenever I see a niche, I see potential. So I actually think that the fact that, at least what you're saying, is that the Drupal community, and that's also what I know about the Drupal community, is very tech-oriented and made of developers, should make it easier to bring people together, because you have something in common that is very strong. In WordPress, you get uber geeks that make enterprise platform for whatever, and me that I started with a blog to show pictures of my son. I have a very cute son, so so I think having a vertical maybe it makes it easier to, I don't know. Business owners, how to sell Drupal to clients. I have the perfect talk for you. I have the perfect talk for you. If you do a Drupal, they have a speaker and I have a talk and everything. How to sell open source to agencies. That's like a very important talk. I want to do this. I want to do this in Torino. Let's do it. Okay, let's do it.
I'm sure Francesca is around, so yes.
Let's do it. Let's start with the open source. I like open source better. If you want to discuss this further, I'm going to be here today until the end of the day and tomorrow morning, and then I'm sadly off.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.